Welcome, everybody. This is TBD CFB coming at you with a rapid reaction after the college football playoff rankings have been released. We're about to listen in just a few minutes. They will be coming out with this week's top 25 college football playoff rankings, which we are anticipating a lot. They have been highly anticipated, and we are anticipating them. So, Kansas and Michigan State has just wrapped up, and what you're seeing on the screen now as we wait for the ranking show to start is each of our top 25 predictions. And these are not our own, obviously, rankings. This is not what we actually think. This is just what we are guessing the committee is going to do. Obviously, we have some things that are the same, some things are different. Why don't we point out some of the things that are different? Joey, why don't we start there?
All right, we'll start out with number 4, Mason not agreeing with me and Isaac. He is putting Penn State over Tennessee in that 4 spot. Mason, what has you putting Penn State there?
I think right now the committee is really valuing wins in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten as a conference. I mean, they have right now they have 2 of the top 4 spots. Georgia's obviously going to drop out of there. Texas is probably going to come up. We're all in agreement on that. So our top 3 actually is all the same. It's State, Texas, but that number 4 spot, you guys have Tennessee. I think their 1 win over Bama is probably a pretty good win. I mean, they do have the loss to Arkansas though. They struggled the last couple of weeks against Kentucky and Mississippi State, and I think Penn State's 1 loss to Ohio State, who's at number 2 above them. I think that gives them just a lot of credibility with the committee right now, especially with Georgia and Miami both losing above them. So that's why I have them where they are.
And talking about Penn State and Tennessee a little bit. So you actually had Tennessee at 5, Mason. Now, me and Isaac both put Penn State at 6 and Indiana above Penn State. Isaac, why don't you explain a little bit why you have Indiana over Penn State? What gives you the difference, even though they're both in the same conference and we're about to see Indiana face off against Ohio State?
Well, for me, guys, it boils down to this. Penn State has given me no reason. Like I said this on why I picked Ohio State over them just a short weeks ago, and I feel the same way now. I feel that Penn State has done nothing to prove they're deserving of a top 5 spot. Now, we could argue Indiana, much of the same. But in my opinion, Indiana's track record, especially coming off a big win over Michigan, in which now, granted, they won by like 5 points. They were 2 touchdown favorites. I get all that. But Penn State, again and again and again, especially against Ohio State, came up really short. And I may feel differently about this after week after next when Indiana and Ohio State play. But I think Indiana has a better resume at this point, and Penn State almost lost to Bowling Green at home, and then they crap the bed late against Ohio State, who is, I would argue, the number 2 favorite in the Big Ten right now. So that's my logic behind putting Indiana above them.
And we're just about to get started here with the ranking show, just about to start as it goes to commercial. However, one thing I did want to point out quickly is that we are actually all in disagreement at the number 25 spot. Specifically, Isaac, I want to ask, why did you put Tulane in at 25 and drop Army out?
Well, it's funny because we had this conversation in the group chat just a couple of days ago, but I think that Tulane has had a better body of work to this point. Tulane, I would say this. Army, it's not that they destroyed North Texas, but they beat them 14-3 over the weekend. I think maybe this past weekend, before last, I can't remember, but it's been the past few days or past week or so. But you had Tulane, who also went to Denton, and they won I think it was 42-21, maybe. I don't know. It was like a 2 or 3 touchdown win. Tulane.
Okay, so you're comparing games against the same team they played in a pretty good North Texas team.
Yeah, I am, and I think that to this point in the year, I think Tulane's put together a really good body of work. I mean, through their first 5 games, now we could argue their opponents, but at the end of the day, they put up 40, 50 plus points a game. You've got Army, who they're going to face Notre Dame in a couple of weeks, and Notre Dame, by the way, just dispatched Navy just a couple of weeks ago. So I think overall, I think Tulane has played a really, really good season, and I'm curious to see how it shapes out this weekend when they play Navy, but I like Tulane to be in the top 25, personally.
And then, obviously, Joey having Army at 25. I don't think there's really any explanation there. It's where the committee had them last week. They'll probably stay there. For me, South Carolina in at 25, jump to Army up. I think the committee is going to have some value with Army. I'm going to disagree with Isaac there a little bit. Joey did make a good point when we were talking earlier that, Navy, Army, they do have game in a couple weeks, but the committee can't go on future games, in my opinion. They got to go on where it stands as of right now, as of this week. And as of this week, Army is undefeated, and they're undefeated in conference. And I think even one loss is going to get them into the AC championship. But I have South Carolina at 25 because I think that they got gypped. We've said that a bunch. Got gypped against LSU. Played a great game against Bama, but came up short. And I'd say that was their own fault. Wouldn't blame refs or anything like that, like I would for the LSU game. However, they beat Texas A&M 10 team at home a few weeks ago. They go on the road to a gritty Vanderbilt team and grind out the win there. So I don't know that committee can really leave out South Carolina, even though they have 3 losses, because their losses are to pretty good teams. And that LSU loss really shouldn't have been a loss. So that's why I got South Carolina there. All right, we are about to get started. The ranking show has just come back from commercial and about to release their top 25 rankings. Once again, here are all of our ranking predictions, not our own picks, predictions for what the committee will do this evening. And here we go. At number 25, we do have Tulane. So that question is going to be, where are we getting Army? Are they going to drop Army out? Like,
that makes me so frustrated.
No, but they are going to jump Army up 1 spot at 24. So that makes me wonder what happened to Missouri after just barely scraping by Oklahoma. They're going to jump up to 23. So all of these teams jumping up 1 spot here.
Missouri going up, still being in the rankings is kind of insane to me.
I agree, and they're going to drop LSU 7 spots to 22.
That's generous.
South Carolina at 21. Wow.
We actually did not expect that at all.
No.
None of us had them there.
So
I'm assuming Clemson's going to be right there.
So you had
I did
at 19. I had
them at 19.
And you didn't have
I had them at 18.
Okay.
Oh, you did? Yeah, you did. I'm assuming Clemson's going to be right above them.
Yeah, so they only go 5 at a time, right? So
yeah.
Yes, Clemson at 20. So they're going 6 at a time.
All right. So that's a little frustrating with the Tulane. Yeah, Louisville.
Yeah, Louisville at 19.
Yeah, right.
Wazoo at 18. They're going to jump up 3 spots. Colorado at 17. Man,
we had them
okay.
right, we
so
had them
now
right
we're kind
17.
of getting into the meat and potatoes right in the middle of this rankings, and we're doing pretty well.
I'm guessing we're seeing Kansas State here above Colorado.
I think that the committee could have ranked Colorado above them when they have the same record and Kansas State beat them. So I think that's why Kansas State's going to go up to 16 here.
Yep.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Which is exactly what's going to happen. Obviously,
yep.
Kansas State comes in at 16. Probably going to see Texas A&M here at 15. We all have that one as our guess for this one, and it looks like they are only going to do 5 in this round right here. So I'll go ahead and say Louisville, Washington State, Colorado, Kansas State, and it looks like they're going to drop Iowa State out of the rankings.
Yeah.
So and Pitt as well, it looks like got dropped out. So we have number 15 Texas A&M. They're going to drop a spot. Only reason, and I tell you what, it's probably going to be A&M, SMU, and Boise State, possibly even Miami, all dropping below Ole Miss because of the win they got against Georgia. So now we're getting into the top 14.
I'm really curious to see where they put Miami after the loss to Georgia Tech.
So we got SMU at the 14 spot.
SMU at the 14 spot, which is exactly where we thought they'd be. Boise State at 13.
But they clinched the playoffs.
If they get there, yes.
Well, as of right now, they're in the playoffs.
Right.
Because of their group of 5 positioning, believe it or not.
Let's see. Because
Georgia,
my guess next is Georgia. But do you guys think that it could be Miami?
Georgia is at 12. Georgia is at 12. Wow.
Yeah, I called that.
That is a shocking one to me.
No, it's not shocking to me. I think that we barely get past Florida. 10. So yeah, we barely get past Florida. We win by 14, but we scored those points in garbage time off of 2 interceptions, like 20 yards away from the end zone. That is a surprise to me, honestly. It doesn't surprise me. I figured they would have Miami above us just because, which has not been released yet, obviously, but I think that they will have Miami above us simply because of the one win over us. They have one more loss. But they are going to rank Ole Miss at 11. That is shocking.
That keeps Miami in the top.
Yeah, why would they have? Yeah, they're really Miami, which I really disagree with. Actually, can't believe that I'm saying this, but yeah, I actually agree more with the AP poll this week. Wow, we have
Alabama at 10.
At 10, yeah. So the committee is obviously valuing Miami. This is not where we thought they were going to be. We thought that after a absolute beatdown of LSU that they were going to jump them up. I guess the committee does not like those losses to Vanderbilt and Tennessee. However, they are in the top 10. So if the season ended today, they would be in the playoffs.
I wonder how much having a Heisman hopeful and Cam Ward gives an effect on Miami's rankings here.
That's a very good question.
I mean, and Miami with the 9 spot, but predicted to be conference
champions. Yep. So they would get the first round bye. That's a Power 14.
So they would get a first round bye there. But, Miami not performing that well all season. What is it? 4 games now, in which one of them was a loss at this point. And yes, Cam Ward is great and everything, but he can't control everything, as you can see with the loss. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little surprised with Miami being still in the top 10, but Georgia dropping as far as they have.
And we're gonna have
with
Notre
better
Dame
losses
at 8, and we're going to have Tennessee at 7. So that
Wow.
tells you what is about to take shape here. And not one of us has got anything correct from 11 up to 7 so far. So
yeah,
we're about to find out.
Now, does the injury to Nico have an effect on Tennessee being ranked so low?
Well, like our episode is going to talk about this week, come back on Thursday night and check it out at 8 p.m. Or at 7:30 p.m. Excuse me. We talk about how Nico is probable actually for this Thursday. Should be for this Saturday. Should be probable. That's what Josh Heupel said. Up next, we're going to have BYU at number 6. So, like I said, that is telling you where the committee's head is at. BYU having a really, really good season this year, actually. They're still undefeated. Barely got that win against Utah this past weekend.
Very gritty game.
Won on a field goal. Really reminded me of the, not quite as dramatic, but really reminded me of the ending to the TCU Baylor game a couple years ago when they went undefeated to the conference championship and ended up making the national championship where they got blown out. But,
I agree.
I'll tell you what.
That was a really magical season for them.
I'll tell you what. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Colorado and Utah because Colorado, of course, is the front runner in the Big 12, and Utah just pushed BYU to the edge. So
yep. And now this is not something I expect to say this year, but yeah, Utah is sitting at 4-5. They had a lot of injury bad luck this year, kind of like Oklahoma. Not as bad luck as Oklahoma, but they're sitting at 4-5 now. As I get an update from ESPN that Georgia has
Indiana is at the 5 spot. Indiana at 5.
So now we're starting to see these rankings kind of come into place. We figured how long it would take the committee to get them up to get these two teams, actually BYU and Indiana, both of them, up into the top 6 because of how they haven't really played anybody, and even though they're undefeated. But like I said, Indiana just beat Michigan, and while that's not a great team this year, like we talked about last year, Michigan's a big brand. So what do? You go and beat the big branded team, and then you jump up 3 spots. So into the top 5.
And defend the national champs. I mean, Michigan, you can talk about all day long how up and down they've been this year, and a big fall off from a natty in January. But at the end of the day, until somebody takes it from them, they got the crown. So
that's right.
We also have to remember Indiana will be playing Ohio State coming up short.
The bye week this week, and
I was going to say Penn State's probably going to be the 4 at the 6.
Penn State pulls in at 4.
How about
so that means obviously they're probably going to go by really quickly, but most likely this is going to be Texas, Ohio State, Oregon 3-2-1. So with those teams, Texas, lost being to Georgia, but now that Georgia lost to Ole Miss and Georgia being ranked 12, loss look even worse considering they scored 0 points in the first half and got outscored 23-0. Ohio State's one loss being to the number 1 team on the road in Oregon, and Oregon just absolutely dominating right now, undefeated, beat every single team by a lot in the Big Ten that they've played. Surprisingly, their closest games were, I think, 10 points against their week 2 opponent.
Boise State.
Well, week 2 was Boise State. They won by 3. Week 1 was against Idaho, against the Vandals, and they only won by 10, which a lot of people were really skeptical about Oregon at that point. But man, have they turned things around. Oregon, is without a doubt the best team in college football this year.
As of right now, yes.
And the committee did obviously put Texas at 3, but we're still waiting on 2 and 1. But I guarantee it's going to be Ohio State, Oregon. What were you about to say, Joey?
I was going to say it feels good to have Oregon back up at the top. I mean, typically, whenever Oregon's up at the top, it means good things are happening in college football.
Right. And
granted,
we have Ohio
been
State.
A while. Yeah, the two position will be Ohio State. We're going to see a mixed up. 2 top 10, 2 top 5 opponents actually within the next few weeks with Ohio State and Indiana coming up. It's going to be very
Ohio State doesn't lose to Northwestern this weekend, but anything is possible.
Considering that Penn State being lucky they don't have to play Michigan this year, or else they probably would have come up with another loss, to be completely honest.
Oh, yeah.
So, what are y'all's thoughts on this top 25 from the committee? As I type it out.
Even though I guessed that they would drop Georgia all the way to 12, I am a little bit surprised by it. I'm just saying this because I'm a Georgia fan. But yeah, I am a little bit surprised by it. But I think if we get past Tennessee this week, that'll be another top 10 opponent that we beat. And so that would probably give us enough power to get back into the top 12. Because right now we're the first team out, which does suck. However, think that if we get past them, we'll get in there. Big one. I'm a fan of them ranking South Carolina at 21. Zoo is still in. We do me as well, and Tulane. We Pitt and Iowa State drop out. I didn't think they were going to drop Iowa State out. I thought they were going to drop Pitt out. It's going to be close, but we'll see what happens. Playoff race starts to kind of work itself out.
So how are we feeling about Tulane, Army, Mizzou being the bottom 3, and then we have an LSU as that next team above that? How are we feeling about that? Are we feeling confident about that going into, prime time with college football season?
I'd say so. And I'd say, too, now Missouri and South Carolina is going to be a ranked matchup. And now, what we're looking at is that if some things happen, South Carolina 100% could actually have a chance at the playoff, even with 3 losses. I think that's absolutely insane. A lot of things are going to have to happen for that. But, with Missouri now being a ranked team, that's going to be a big win for South Carolina. But I think that, Army, Mizzou, Tulane, it's going to work itself out. I think Mizzou is going to end up losing to South Carolina probably this week, maybe. And if they do, they're going to drop out for sure. Tulane and Army, that'll also work itself out. Tulane goes undefeated, makes the AC, and Army does the same. Then, that'll work itself out because one of those two is going to, probably make the college football playoff. Looks like right now the committee really likes Boise State for that auto bid to get into the playoff at 12. So as the group of 5 team, but anything is possible. There's a lot of teams, from 12 to 25, honestly, that could end up making a run at this playoff.
And lastly, we're still seeing some, and we'll discuss this a little bit in the actual episode, but with these rankings, you really got to think about conferences are still up in the air. SEC, ACC, and really Big Ten, all the Power Four conferences kind of all up in the air still. Who's going to be competing in that championship? How important is it to get as high as you can, even if you have no chance of making that auto bid and getting into your conference championship?
Well, I actually think that you're really going to get a bye week either way if you don't make the conference championship, because you won't have to play conference championship week. And I guarantee you, there's going to be a lot of schools in all of those Power Four conferences that are going to go right back to work practicing scrimmaging that Saturday of the championship weekend, just because they might have a shot at the playoff and they're going to have to get in shape and get ready to play, before that next week. It's actually what Ohio State did in 2022 when they made the playoff. They actually got right back to work on the Saturday that Georgia was playing LSU in the SEC championship, got right back to work, went out and played a great game against us. We ended up pulling it out, but barely. That was a really good Ohio State team. And I think that a lot of schools are going to do that. So I don't know that there's necessarily an importance of making your conference championship. However, for instance, this weekend, let's say that Georgia and Alabama, everybody, in the top, who already has 2 losses, in the SEC, if they all win, that would put Tennessee at 7-2, and you would have like 4 7-2 teams. You'd have Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU all at 2 losses in the SEC. So you got a 4-way tie for the second place, and whoever wins Texas A&M in week 15, I guess technically, or week 14, is going to make the SEC championship, because they both only have 1 loss. Unless Arkansas comes out the cut this week and just decimates Florida, decimates Texas somehow, it's going to be Texas or Texas A&M versus Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, or Georgia. Or actually Ole Miss, too, is in that equation, too, because they also have 2 losses. There's a lot of things that can happen. There's still chaos waiting to be had, but I think it's going to be interesting.
And Isaac, this last question is for you to get you a little involved. For those who are somewhat favorited for conference champion or to make the conference championship, who needs to look over their shoulder and watch their back the most? You got teams like BYU, who will most likely have to play somebody like Colorado or Kansas State. You got SMU, who is in the lead for the ACC right now, but they have to look out for Miami, or who knows, maybe even Clemson or Louisville. And then, of course, we all know the drama going on in the SEC, as Mason just stated. And then, of course, the Big Ten. We got 1 and 2 being the Big Ten right now, and then, of course, 4 and 5 being Big Ten as well. So who do you think has to watch over their shoulder the most?
Well, after this last weekend, I've got to say the number 1 team to watch their back has got to be Miami. Miami has had too many close calls. I personally am of the thought that Miami should have taken their first loss well before now. They should have lost to Virginia Tech. I did see the end of that one. I did not see the end of the Cal game. I know there was a lot of talk about, there was some controversy on a late comeback. Listen, Cam Ward is great. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking their 45-year-old tight ends. I'm not knocking those guys. What I am knocking is the fact they've had too many close games. And then they finally, of course, lost to Georgia Tech. I'll be honest. I picked Miami to win this past weekend. I had them to cover the spread. I was like, yeah, it's Georgia Tech, but I severely underestimated Haynes King and that offense. Miami, number 1. Number 2, I'm hesitant to say Oregon, simply because it was such a close game against Ohio State. But I think we've seen. I'm not saying Oregon needs to. I'm going to give my defense why they do not, because over the past few weeks since they played Ohio State, we've seen Ohio State. They barely closed out against Nebraska in Columbus. Then they went to Happy Valley, and I don't think they won that game. I think Penn State lost that game. They get the 1st and goal inside the 5. You run it up the middle 3 times in a row. If you're going to beat the great teams, you just can't do that. And now that makes James Franklin 1-9 against Ohio State, which I would argue is the big one. I know Michigan's a big opponent every year, but I would argue the bigger opponent for them is Ohio State. They've won it once in 2016. And then lost to Iowa, so they didn't make the CFP, and Ohio State did that year. So James Franklin, I'm not going to go down that road right now, but Ohio State definitely, I would say I would say that Oregon definitely doesn't have much to look out for. And then in the American, I would say Tulane's put up a good year. I would say if Tulane beats Navy this weekend in Annapolis, that obviously they've got the inside track to the American. But then you've got Army. We'll see what happens to Army and Notre Dame. Of course, it's a non-conference game. But I think the American, personally, is Tulane's conference to lose, because Navy, like we said, they lost to Notre Dame, and then they kind of fell flat last week. Of course, they did win against a South Florida team. They handled them. I mean, they were only favored by 3 points, and they beat them by 21 or whatever. So I would say the American is Tulane's to lose, personally. And I would say those are the main three I think of right now. I think Oregon, it's their conference to lose in the Big Ten. The American is Tulane's to lose. But Miami needs to watch out, because as much as we can talk about Clemson being an off year and Dabo won't use the portal and blah, 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 at the end of the day, it's still Clemson. It's still Dabo Swinney. And the Tigers, in my opinion, it's theirs to lose, because I don't think Miami is who everybody thinks they are, personally.
We really may end up seeing SMU and Miami in the ACC championship, but close race, because you still got Clemson, Miami, and SMU in the running. I mean, every Power 5 conference right now, even the AAC, and the Mountain West, still got a. I mean, it's a close race for all these conferences. There's a lot of parity in college football this year. I did want to just say though, for predictions, you got both tied. You went 8 for 25, and I ended up going 12 for 25. I think that middle. Let's see here. 18 through 12. I got them all right. Joey crazy for saying that the committee was going to put Georgia at 12, but ended up getting it right anyway. I just figured they would. And that's how these rankings ended up. Guys, please come back on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, not 7:30 or 8, 7 o'clock. Come back. We'll be live here 7 o'clock on Thursday for the next episode of TBD CFB. We're going to pick the biggest games of week 12. We're already 12 weeks through the season. That is insane. It just flew right by us. So thank you guys, and we will see you on Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Later.